So hey guys, today tech today I'm gonna watch ACP. Let me just check. Um, ACP-463. Yeah. What the heck is wrong with this fucking thing? Let's start.
The train station buzzed with life, a cacophony of voices blending with the rhythmic clatter of trains arriving and departing. Farewells and reunions swirled around, filled with hope and sorrow. Amidst the crowd, a mother clutched a small, weathered box to her chest, her hands trembling.
"Don't do anything, wife,"
she urged, her voice tight as she gazed up at her son. Though he stood tall in her eyes, he was still the child she had raised, full of dreams. The son forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The sharp whistle of the train cut through the noise, a reminder of the time slipping away. He leaned down and embraced her, as though trying to still the storm of dread swirling inside him.
"Take this."
She pressed the box into his hands.
"Don't ever open it. But if you're captured, give it to them as a gift."
The boy took the box from his mother.
"Do you promise me?"
"I promise," he said, feeling the weight of her words. He glanced at his little sister, her wide eyes filled with innocence as she sat in her wheelchair. Leaning down, he kissed her gently on the forehead.
"Be brave,"
she whispered, the sincerity of her words piercing through the noise around them. The train's whistle shrieked again, and the boy stepped back, his heart aching as he waved one last goodbye. The train lurched into motion, pulling him away from everything familiar into the unknown. The battlefield air was thick with the smell of smoke and gunpowder. The boy, having quickly become a young man from the demands of war, gripped his rifle tighter. Try as he might, the sound of explosions and gunfire drowned out all thoughts of home as battle raged all around him. "Get down!" a voice shouted, and he dove into a trench, just as an explosion rocked the earth nearby. The young man fought fiercely, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Each encounter was a blur of movement and instinct. Every moment, a razor-thin line between life and death. In the thick of the fighting, the din of war faded, leaving only the pounding of his own heart echoing in his ears. He saw his comrades fall, one by one, their lives extinguished in an instant. It was a relentless tide of violence, and he was swept along with it. But then, in a moment, everything changed. A large blast threw him off his feet. Dazed and disoriented, he looked up to see enemy soldiers approaching, their faces shrouded in grim determination. Before he could react, they seized him, dragging him and the few other soldiers that were still alive away from the battlefield they had fought so fiercely to defend. The soldiers dragged him through the mud, and the young man glanced up. Through blurred eyes, he could just barely see where they were taking him. Towards a large trench where others of his fellow soldiers were already lined up. He watched as they were shot without warning and tumbled back into the mass grave. Suddenly, his mother's parting words filled his ears.
"Give it to them as a gift."
"Wait!" the young man hoarsely shouted.
"Please, wait. I have something to offer you."
The soldiers dragging him abruptly stopped and looked at each other with skepticism. "What do you mean?" one demanded. "You have information?"
"I have this,"
he said, pulling the...
So I think it's kind of a spoon-like thing that crushes you. I think now it's gonna give it to them, and whatever it is, it's gonna kill them. Fuck, this thing, I must fix it. Okay.
Small box from his pocket, the one his mother had given him. The one he had managed to keep safe with him this whole time, across countless battles and hundreds, perhaps thousands of miles of war.
Ow!
The soldiers looked at each other again, and their skepticism turned into mockery. The two men both began to laugh as one of them snatched the box from the young man's hands. Without pausing, he opened the box, tossing the wooden lid to the ground. "What's this?" A treasure? He mockingly asked. The object in the box glinted in the light. It wasn't a treasure at all, just a simple silver spoon. His laughter stopped. Very well. In repayment, you won't die. Not here, at least. The young man didn't have any time to question what this meant, though, since a club immediately struck the back of his head, sending him into a deep, dark black. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a damp, dark cell, raucous laughter echoing off the walls. The same soldiers who had taken him on the battlefield were now sitting with several others, talking to each other in their native tongue. The one who had dragged the young man began to act out a pantomime of the young man offering him the box, much to the amusement of his fellow soldiers. The young man watched through the bars of the cell as the soldier now reached into the box and grabbed the spoon, holding it up like a war trophy as the group laughed harder and harder, none more than the one holding the spoon. His laughter, though, abruptly stopped, and a sharp crack echoed through the room, louder than any bullet. The soldier's body twisted grotesquely, his spine bending backward with an unnatural snap. His eyes bulged wide, panic overtaking his once smug face, before he crumpled to the ground. The rest of the soldiers gasped and stepped back, horrified at what they had just seen. But try as they might, none of them could look away. Their compulsive curiosity forced them all to keep looking at the twisted body of their friend, or, more specifically, at the spoon he still clutched in his hand. Slowly, carefully, one of the soldiers stepped forward, kneeled down, and reached for the spoon. He had to work to pry it from the paralyzed hand of his comrade, and the moment he gripped the handle, another crack rang out, even louder this time, as he too saw the spine fold backwards at a perfect 90-degree angle. The soldier fell to the floor, the spoon dropping to the ground near him. But the other soldiers didn't run. Just like their friend, one by one, they each watched in turn as another picked up the spoon, and immediately upon having a firm grip, saw their body contort backwards at a right angle. The young man couldn't believe what was happening. Soldier after soldier watched, waiting for their turn to be bent backwards, until finally, only one was left. He struggled, trying to resist the strange compulsion to pick up the cursed spoon, but he couldn't. He too joined his comrades, his spine snapped as his body collapsed to the floor. As the last soldier fell, so too did the spoon, landing not far from the young man's cell. He could suddenly feel it calling to him. He didn't just want to hold the spoon, he needed it. If he just reached out through the bars of his cell, he could almost touch it. Shouts in a language he barely understood echoed in from the corridor. Moments later, the door to the damp room swung open with a loud bang. A group of soldiers, with different uniforms from those who had captured him, stormed in. One of the soldiers surveilled the scene, the soldiers that lay twisted and broken on the ground. "What in the hell happened here?" he exclaimed, his gaze landing on the silver spoon. As the soldier curiously reached for the spoon, the sergeant inadvertently kicked it away and pointed at the young man's cell. "Get him out!" he barked. His command snapped the soldiers into action. "Please, the spoon!" the young man cried, his voice desperate and frantic. But the soldiers didn't understand the language he was speaking. They were too busy fishing through the pockets of the fallen soldiers, trying to find keys to his cell. "Calm down, we're trying to help you, son," the sergeant replied, his tone edged with annoyance. Finally, one soldier finds the keys. The door to his cell swings open, and the young man dives to the ground. The Allied soldiers exchanged awkward glances. They initially believed the young man was dropping to his knees in gratitude for being saved. Instead, he was scrambling across the dirt floor, desperately searching for something. "I think he's looking for this," one of the soldiers said, holding up a spoon by the tip of its handle. The young man's eyes widened. "That's mine!" he shouted, lunging toward it. Several Allied soldiers grabbed the young man, unsure of his intentions, but as he moved, the soldier with the spoon instinctively tightened his grip on it. A loud crack pierced the air. Everyone turned just in time to see the Allied soldier bend backward at a perfect 90-degree angle, his face contorting in pain and shock as he collapsed to the ground. A wave of compulsive curiosity began to spread among the soldiers as they stared at the scene. One by one, they all started to move closer to the spoon. Their sergeant, a seasoned SCP agent who had decided to join the fight against tyranny and whose long service with the Foundation had given him experience with strange anomalies, barked out a sharp command. Leave it! He shouted, catching one of his men just as he touched the handle with the tips of his fingers.
What is it? Cheers.
Everybody step back! The urgency in his voice snapped the soldiers out of their daze. They instinctively moved aside, creating space between themselves and the spoon's sinister aura. Slowly, carefully, the sergeant knelt down and scooped the spoon into the wooden box, his movements deliberate and steady. As the young man watched the sergeant slide the box's lid closed, he couldn't help but chuckle bitterly to himself. The very object that was meant to protect him had almost become the harbinger of his death. This seemingly harmless object, now classified as SCP-463, is deceptively simple, a spoon that bends its victims. When gripped by human hands, it forces their spine to snap backward at a 90-degree angle just below the T6 thoracic vertebra, resulting in near instantaneous death or severe paralysis. Its effects are immediate and unavoidable. No gloves, barriers, or protective gear can prevent the violent contortions. Despite its mundane appearance, SCP-463 has claimed multiple lives during testing. Strangely, it only affects humans, showing no unusual properties when handled by non-human subjects. Even indirect contact, such as through gloves, does nothing to reduce its deadly impact, suggesting the spoon possesses some sort of psychic or anomalous trigger. Researchers at the SCP Foundation have conducted extensive analysis using neutron imaging, MRI, but the nature of SCP-463's lethal effect remains unknown. All they can observe are the horrifying results, a sudden, violent muscle contraction that bends the human body unnaturally. Currently, SCP-463 is housed in a secure containment site, kept in a small, reinforced glass.
Okay, but what is this green stuff that is on the thing? I think it is green or gray. What the heck is that? And how could you even study something that can is a spoon, but by touching it, it can make you bend? I don't know. It's actually a nice SCP, but actually a really silly one.
Display case. Transport and handling are strictly regulated, and personnel are prohibited from directly interacting with the spoon under any circumstances. After an incident during testing, food and utensils are no longer allowed near SCP-463's containment area, though the exact details of that incident remain classified. Let this story serve as a reminder. Even the simplest, most ordinary objects can mask unimaginable danger. After all, who would have thought something as simple as a spoon could become such a deadly anomaly? Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, and be sure to...
So that's that. It's my first video reacting to SCPs. But if you guys like it, I would make more. So like, subscribe, share, you ugly bear. And that's that. Goodbye. Peace.